Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the In11 podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the show where we bring on those from the world of football to show you what it takes to be in the 11 at the highest possible level. This week's guest is current Flower City Union captain Alex Ainscough, stepping in to tell us about his career, and it is a super interesting one. I had a ton of fun recording this one, and so much fun that we went pretty long. So if you'll notice, we have chopped this up into two parts. So in this first part here, we talk so much about his earlier career, his time at Stanford, which at the time he was there, it was probably the peak of Stanford's powers, and it was loaded with guys who are now playing the professional level. And when Stanford was right around that time when they were winning tons of national championships. We also talk about then his decision to forego college and then go on to the professional ranks and the beginning of his journey bouncing overseas. So as soon as you finish up this one, be on the lookout for that part 2 to hear the rest of Alex's journey. I believe this is going to come out on, if you're listening to this today, it comes out on Tuesday, and by Thursday we should have the second part all set to go for you as well. So sit back, relax, and take a listen to the career of Alex Ainscough. Break from a hectic season. Alex has stepped into the 11 with us. Unfortunately, as we were just talking about, off the cusp of a little injury, but hopefully it's not one that will last too long. Alex, I appreciate you taking the time to step in and talk with us and to talk about your career a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan, for having me. I'd actually I had recently started listening to your podcast a bit. Started actually when I saw Luke Bavone was on, and I had played with him in Richmond, so I saw that on social media, made me check it out, and then the last couple episodes since then been listening as well.
That's awesome, man. Love to hear that. I think that's been one of the cool things about doing this for me too. Is as I interview more players, I speak to more players. It's always like somebody who I've had on in the past has been like, "Oh, you had him on? I played with him, or I knew him," and it's guys that I wouldn't even expect to have known each other. That always happens. I figured there might have been a connection there, because you guys were both, I think, at the Kickers probably at the same time. And then we had Cam Vickers too, who also played at the Kickers. That might have been different times than you, but it's funny, as I'm sure you know, and I say here a lot, the soccer world is a lot smaller than people think.
Super small. And also it's just, you get kind of hooked on it because it's all very relatable stories. And I think I hear so many things that guys have gone through that like I've gone through the exact same thing, and you think sometimes you're the only one who has to put up with the tough side of football, but it's kind of like makes you feel like you want to keep going when you hear other guys are all going through the same thing, and also takes you out of moments where you maybe feeling bad for yourself a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully the more people you can hear, and the more people that we can kind of, I guess, inspire that maybe want to do something similar, go on to play football, they can understand that there's a lot of things that happen where you might hear it on a podcast from us and be like, that can't possibly be what it's like to play professionally.
Yeah.
It is, you might have to sleep in an airport. You might have to do some crazy things that you would not expect. But it's all just in chase of this little ball that we love to chase around the field.
Yeah, exactly that, man.
So if we kind of take it back here, I'm guessing football was kind of in and around you from moment one, with your dad's history with the game and him being a coach. And I can't imagine that you were able to steer clear of football for very long.
Yeah, no, I mean he made it really easy for me growing up because he was involved, but there was no pressure at all in terms of getting me to play. It was just, I was the one dragging him out to go kick a ball, and not vice versa. So it was a really like healthy relationship in that sense. And also, I mean, he still, I think, he didn't coach me at every age level, but I think I still rate him as probably the best coach I've ever had for, and I honestly wish when you're a kid, a lot of times when you're hearing info and feedback, you don't want to hear it from your dad. You'll hear it from anyone else. So there's a lot of stuff I wish I had have maybe taken on board
Yeah.
more when I was that age. But now, even still, he's a guy that I can talk to when when he's able to see my games and give me feedback that like it's really it is a good resource to have.
Yeah, absolutely. So how early on in your career, obviously, it's influenced by the fact that your dad at this time, is he in the college game? Is he coaching at the college level kind of when you're growing up in your youth career?
Yeah, so we moved around a little bit when I was a kid. He coached at Providence College when I was born, and then we moved up to Maine actually because he took a job with Bowdoin College, which is like a smaller D3 school. I
Hmm.
was there basically through elementary school, and then came back to Boston when he got a job at Northeastern. Um, and and yeah, so moving around a little bit, nothing too crazy, but was always in and around his teams, going to their
Hmm.
training sessions, going on away trips, stuff like that. And I think that sort of made me feel like seeing the players and stuff like that when I was, you know, 10, 11, 12, 13, and could get an understanding of what that level was like, made me feel like it wasn't that far away. And
Mm.
made me feel like it was because I was around them all the time. It made me feel like it was super realistic for me to get to that kind of level at some point.
Yeah, so you almost answered my next question right there. And was the goal then kind of for you, because you were so immersed in college soccer, were you already starting to think about maybe the professional ranks, or was it kind of because you knew so much about college soccer and kind of that's where you were around all the time? Was that your goal when you were in those ages of 11, 12, 13, 14 sort of?
Um, No, I think well, there's it's funny. Like, there's two sides to being around college. Is like I think it was great to be exposed to um, those players, and like sometimes, I mean, he would even let me hop into training sessions, or like if they were having a captain's practice over the summer, I could get in. So like um, like I said, that sort of gives you a sense of where what your level is at and where you need to get to and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, but there were also parts of seeing him in the college game that put me off college soccer to where and made it more so that like my only goal when I was growing up was to play pro. Like I was
Mm.
obsessed. It was an obsession for me. That's all I cared about. Um, and what I mean by that is things about college, like the limited training time you can have with your players. Um, the differences in motivation between guys that want to push on and guys that are just there to get their degree. Not that
Mm.
there's anything wrong with that, but it sort of gave me the sense that like this environment isn't really what I want. Like I want something more than this eventually.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean I have to bypass college, like because especially when I'm at the age where growing up, that was not really a feasible thing, or
Yeah.
not as feasible a thing. Like you had to go to Europe, whereas now I feel like it's with USL and how much the game has grown. Like now it's super realistic for guys to not go to college and go play pro and get their degree at the same time, even. But for me, it was like it. The thought was sort of it'd be great if I could go play pro right away,
Hmm.
but realistically, I'll probably end up in college. And and yeah, all those experiences that I gained as a kid would help me get to that point.
Yeah. It's so funny that you mentioned that, how that's a shift in kind of, I've talked about this on a few other episodes in the US soccer world, where like, and it's not even really that far ago, because you were in Stanford at what, 2014, right?
14, yeah.
So that was still like the time when that was sort of the traditional route, right? You went to college soccer and then you kind of went to the pro game after that. And it's like in the blink of an eye, what, that's only been 6, 7, 8 years. Now it's such a different scene, sort of, for now we have MLS Next. We have routes for guys to get over to Europe even earlier than they have in the past. And so it's funny when you say like that even such a short time ago, that was still kind of the path for how to go to the pro game. And now it's changed so differently. And, none of our really top players really are even considering the college game now. I would say, kind of 18, 19-year olds at around that level. So it's funny how quick kind of things change in football, at least in our country.
Well, yeah, and for me, it all comes down to finances because I remember when I was like a junior, senior in high school, the minimum salary in MLS must have been like 40 grand.
Yeah, that
And
too. Yeah,
so, I mean, just from a practical standpoint, when you're looking at that, you're thinking, okay, well, what's a full ride to name a school worth like more than that? You know what I mean? So it's just practically, financially, it just doesn't make sense to take an MLS contract in high school unless you're like a no-brainer prospect and maybe you're even
yeah,
signing for more than the minimum. Or you just love football. I mean, realistically, if that was never on the table for me, but if it was on the table, like I was taking that 40 grand.
yeah,
But like now the pathway for kids is like, okay, maybe USL you're making that, maybe MLS you're making. I think the minimum now is like 80 grand around there.
yeah,
And then beyond that, the market for players, for young players in MLS to push on to Europe is crazy now compared to what it was then. Like I think of players that were signing homegrown or going to college, when I was 18, 19, that they were just 5 years too early to the game
yeah,
because if they were coming out now, they'd be like borderline like $1 million transfers to to Europe.
yeah. It's crazy. It's like
It's
the
crazy.
Americans are just sort of the next or the newest hot toy or video game on the market right now. Everybody's like very curious about it, and it's like you just constantly hear of a new player has interest from Europe, and it's fascinating. It's exciting, I think, for the country. I still think it will be kind of yet to be seen if it all can kind of come to a head, and then we can start to do well at the national team level. But I heard you say something there, kind of as you were talking about your journey of maybe looking at college, also really pushing towards the program. You said you kind of were obsessed with that. You became obsessed with that as a high school age player. What did that mean to you? Like what does that obsession kind of look like? How did it manifest itself for you as a youth player and going about your day to day?
I think it was just, nothing. We talk about, guys talk about when you want to get to a certain level, you have to make, sacrifices in other areas of your life, be that academic. When you're in school, you maybe don't spend as much time in school. Social, maybe you don't spend as much time with friends. Even, missing out on family events, things like that.
Mm,
And I guess for me, like none of those things, the reason I knew I was obsessed is because like none of those things ever felt like a sacrifice
yeah,
to miss out on any of those things. Like if the decision was to go train or to do, XYZ, it's just a no brainer for me. Like I didn't even have to think twice. And, you know, at a younger age, younger meaning, the early years of my club career. So maybe up until 15, I really struggled with a lot of injuries, mainly like overuse type injuries, so stress fractures, little muscle pulls, things like that. Um, and you know, the fact that didn't those setbacks didn't hold me back too much at that age
hmm,
was a sign to me that like I'm not gonna let these little things stop me. And I felt like that helped me build like a sense of resiliency, I guess, at that age. And then like coming out the other end of that is when I actually started to get like a positive kind of feedback loop from my playing.
yeah,
Like it felt like for every hour that I was putting in, I was getting that much better. And sometimes you get to a point later in your career where you plateau, but like that was the time, like I would say 16 to 18, where it was just like I could go train like 2 3 times a day and like play, and then everything that I was putting in was like coming out on the field, like scoring goals, getting assists, um standing out on the field. And yeah, I just became like really, like I said, obsessed with that, like
yeah.
that feedback cycle, I guess.
Yeah, that feeling of getting better, that feeling of the work that you're putting in is actually paying off. When
Yeah.
you talk about like that feedback loop, that positive feedback loop, is that because I'm curious, I think a lot of players, I can say from personal experience, I'm sure a lot of players can resonate with this. I think a lot of players struggle with their confidence on the field. they struggle
Mhm.
with their ability to go in and back themselves, and if they make a mistake to not get down on themselves. And whether or not that be a coach that's providing them negative feedback, that they need to sort of learn how to handle that and then still remain positive. Like when you mention that positive feedback loop, is that like your coaches are also giving you the feedback as well, so that's kind of hyping you up a little bit? Or is it coming from your teammates, or is it really like internal and I'm seeing it for myself? I know what I'm doing. It doesn't matter what I'm hearing or what I'm seeing on the outside, kind of.
That's like that. I really appreciate that question because I appreciate your understanding of that, because I had probably no understanding of the differentiation between internal and external
Yes.
until maybe the past year or so. So at that time, it was all external.
Mm,
So teammates, coaches, you're getting interest from all these schools. You're getting interest from agents, stuff like that. You don't even have to worry. It's just everything is happy, and you know it's easy to go train, it's easy to go do all that stuff, like I said. um, and I felt like in the early stages of my pro career, that feedback loop shut off.
mm,
um, so, or even when I went to college, that feedback loop shut off, because there would be I would go and play, and think I'm training really well, think I'm playing really well, and then you know for the first time in my life, I'm not playing every minute of every game.
yep.
And then you start to question yourself, question if you know how to evaluate a good performance versus a bad performance. And that was a real problem for me. It took me a long, long time to get over. And it wasn't until I actually started to value my own opinion of myself and not rely on all that external stuff that
Yeah.
like I sort of came out the other end of that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, to be perfectly honest, it's still something that with me as a player, I still struggle with, because for me, I kind of noticed about myself that I would get, in game or in training, it was almost like I became so, the fuel for me was when I did something good, when somebody would say it, like, oh, that's a good ball or good
Yeah,
tackle. Like, I needed that.
exactly the
And like,
same.
especially, I'm sure you can relate to this when you go overseas and you don't speak the language. So people aren't going to, one, they're not going to really, praise you in the middle of a training session, because they're all here to do the same job, like some players are like that, some players just aren't like that. But then to also, they're not going to also find the praise for you, recognize that you don't speak the language, and then like translate it to English for you. Like that's so much extra work that they have to do. Um, so it's like, it becomes a very quiet place for you when you're on the field, and that's when you really start to hear your own thoughts. And for a lot of players, that can get to a really scary place.
Yep.
And I've been there before, and then you're just harping on every single mistake that you've made, and you're like, everyone's thinking about that mistake, everybody thinks I'm terrible, and I'm like, holy shit, man, you got to stop, or you're never going to be able to play the level you can.
Yeah, no, that couldn't be more like similar to what I experienced from probably the start of college up until maybe honestly the middle of last season.
Mm,
Like it took a long, long time, and it wasn't until I started actually working with a sports psych online, um, that sort of helped me get out the other end of that. And obviously, like I'll have my setbacks from time to time, but it's a lot better than it was. Um, and yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about how much the mental side of things, I think affects performance.
Has there been any? Because I think I want to hammer that point home too. Like that's something that I think is still sort of newer in being accepted, kind of in the game. Like speaking about the mental side of it and doing that sort of sport performance side of the game. Um, is there anything one kind of thing that you've really taken away, a tip or something that the sports psych coach has kind of worked with you about, that you've maybe changed your own feedback loop in the way that you go about day to day?
Yeah, I think there's two things. The first kind of ties into what we're talking about, and it's like, part of stabilizing your own feedback loop is having a really strong self-image
Mm.
and self-identity. Um, and important for me with that was like not tying my entire self-identity to myself as a player.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because once you do that, then obviously you consider your entire self-worth to be based on how you're performing
Yep.
from session to session, game to game. And if that's not going well, then I mean, basically everything in your life feels like it's not going well.
Yep.
So it's impossible to have, a stable mindset when you're in that constant up and down. Um, because the key to being able, I think, to perform consistently is being consistent in your mind.
Mm.
Um, and then the second thing I would say is just like uh, how he got me to be very uh, disciplined with how I set my goals and how I go about that side of things. Because I mean, I would always it's sort of in my head like set goals. Like I said, when I was growing up, I want to play pro.
Hmm.
When I was in college, it's like I want to get in the starting lineup, but it's like what does that actually mean, and what do you need to do to get to those goals?
Mm.
Um, and I was never, even though like it was never a problem for me in my career to like go and put in the work and train and do this, but I really did, in retrospect, never really had like a roadmap of how I'm going to get from A to B.
Mm.
So, like on a small level, you're on the bench and you want to start. Well, it's like, okay, what does the coach think I need to do? What do I need to train to improve on those things? And then can I stay, not just that, but can you stay disciplined to it for a period of time and not change because you're not getting results in 1 week? And really trust that if you stick to that, you're gonna get the rewards that you want. Um, so yeah, he kind of got me to be more disciplined and concrete and like writing those out, having measurable ways to determine if I'm achieving those goals,
Hmm.
and then also to really trust. Like it sounds stupid, probably everyone says it, but like to trust that process,
Yeah.
um, for a period of time. Um, and it's funny because that's always something that if you had to ask me before I was working with him, I'd be like, yeah, I'm super disciplined, this, that. And even maybe other people would say that I'm disciplined in my routines and stuff like that. Um, but um, in retrospect, like I was nowhere near where I needed to be in that regard to actually get results.
Hmm.
Um, and I think so. Yeah, those were the two things I think that he helped me improve the most on,
Mm.
amongst a bunch of other things. Like it's honestly been, I think the best thing I've done for my career.
Good. Yeah, I hear that same kind of sentiment from a lot of players who have done something similar to that. That it's unlocked amazing things in their game. And it sounds like maybe the first point of real adversity or kind of friction that you faced in your career was when you obviously those injuries when you were a young player, but then kind of when you go to Stanford and it's now like you look at the roster that you were a part of there, it's loaded from top to bottom with guys who are now playing professionally and really good players, and obviously you can speak to that firsthand. um, so you mentioned that feedback loop kind of where you're getting that interest maybe from Stanford, and they want you to come to the school. What's it then like to go into the school and talk about just maybe that first year, kind of the experience of it?
Yeah. Um, that's like a situation where if there was one situation where I wish I had the mindset that I do now,
Hmm.
it would be that one because man, the training environment, the access to resources um, that I had at Stanford is uncomparable to anything that I've experienced since then.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's honestly, I mean, MLS has come a long way now to where you can maybe say like that's a step above, but I mean, it's really as good as you can get in terms of that stuff. And the training environment was just a combination of the demands of the coaches, but also, I mean, the players, like you said, that I was around.
Hmm.
But when I was coming in, you couldn't tell me that. Like I was coming in and I was going to start and I was going to be in the mix to get a Generation Adidas contract. And this is not stuff that I'm not a very outwardly confident guy. Like, I'm not going out and saying these things,
Mhm.
but in my head, that's my path.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's going to happen. And I think, to be honest, like, a little bit of that arrogance was good for me, because when I came in, like, I did initially, like, get more playing time than most of the freshmen
Hmm.
in my class, which, like, when you look at that class, like, I think we had like 8 of the 10 kids ended up playing pro at some level, like
Wow.
MLS or USL, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I came in and initially, like, did pretty well, and then I got a groin injury. I think it was like maybe 3 weeks into the regular season, and in college, once you get injured, you're kind of always playing catch up.
Yep.
Um, but that setback, you could say, for me, was like coming back, getting fit, and then not getting a look. Like, I think I might have had one appearance after that for the rest of the season. Like, that is where I started to handle things poorly. Um, and so, what do I mean by that? Well, my answer to things growing up, like I said, because of that positive feedback loop, was always, if I train more, I'm going to get more out of it, and it's going to show up immediately.
Yeah.
Um, so in that situation, it's like, okay, I'm not playing. I'm going to train my ass off. I'm going to stay after. I'm going to go lift extra, do this, and it became a thing now where it's now I'm overtraining.
Yep.
Now I'm not. Now I'm not performing when I need to perform. I'm performing um, on an individual session, but then when I go to the team session, like, I'm knackered,
Mm.
and and I don't even realize it at the time. But in retrospect, it's like, you might not feel physically fatigued, but you're mentally fatigued because you've already trained that day, and the guy that you're going against to try to take a spot is fresh as anything, and that's why he looks like he's running circles around you. Um, so so yeah, I actually, now that I've gone off on that little bit of a tangent, I forgot the original question.
No, no, that's okay. That's I mean perfect, because I think like we have so many players on here, and they just talk about like they just put their head down and they train more, right? They do more and they do more and they do more, and
Yeah.
it's like you have to strike a bit of a balance with it. And I don't know if really the correct sentiment is less is more, but with the sense of like a college soccer season, which for those who are unfamiliar with it, it's so compact, right? You're looking at playing like 18 to 20 games in the span of 3 months, maybe 4 months, if you're really like playing into the later rounds of the playoffs. So it's essentially like a game every Wednesday, Saturday, and whatever that cadence looks like for your conference or for your team. So to then be also adding gym work onto that, to also be adding individual sessions onto that, it's like eventually your body just starts to break down. And then when it's time for you to perform, whether it be in training, which is that showcase, can I get into the 11 or can I get into the match? And then also the matches themselves, it's like you don't actually have even close to 100%. And I think, I mean, regardless of that, every college player will probably tell you, like, once you get 5, 6 kind of games into the season and then beyond, like, you never really feel that good. You never feel that recovered at any point, because it's just such a demand on your body. Because I don't really think you're meant to play that many games in that short a span of time. But it sounds like for you, you sort of took that feedback of, okay, you're not playing, and then you just thought, okay, well, I can control it by the amount of hours that I kind of put in the bank here. But then it didn't really come to the reward that you were looking for.
Right. And then, not only, like, because you don't get the rewards right away, it's like, well, initially I might have been doing the right thing by, staying after training to work on my finishing, or, doing like one extra gym session. But then, um, you know, he's not changing I see that he's not changing the team,
Mm,
and I think it's totally me. Whereas in retrospect, like, it's because we're winning every game, and he's got two seniors starting, which is, now I can look at that situation and be like, yeah, no wonder you weren't like,
yeah.
no doubt you weren't going to play. Like, you were up against it from the start. But when you're in that moment, it's really tough not to get frustrated, and especially when I think most kids, when they're going into a program like that, they've had a lot of success
Yes.
in youth level. So it really is a rude awakening when you get into that environment and you're competing against those guys day in, day out. And you're seeing other guys that you played with in youth level who went to, other schools that you felt like you were better than, and now they're playing more than you.
Mm-hmm.
And that, then you start to get into another area, which is like comparing yourself to other people, which is like, I think one of the biggest pitfalls um, for a player, and something that I used to do all the time when I was college, when I was pro. Um, and yeah, that was something that really, really held me back as well.
Mm. So then how did it kind of progress? Obviously, it unfortunately didn't lead to getting into the team as much, even though the team might have had a lot of success that year. Individually, maybe it wasn't the season that you were looking for. As the season closes, kind of what's going through your head, and where's your head at in terms of going forward?
Yeah, my head is still in the same place, so it's I'm gonna crush it this winter and spring,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna get myself on the field. And yeah, those opportunities come the springtime didn't really come, and yeah, just the frustration reached a point where I'm like, this just isn't the right fit, I don't think, for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to go a place to somewhere where I can play, because it wasn't going to get any easier the next season. So initially, like, I was looking to transfer late in that spring, and I like went in, asked for my release, and initially, the coach told me like, yes, we'll give it to you, and then he had a separate conversation with my parents, where he sort of, said, hey, I think Alex is making a bit of a mistake here, so on and so forth, and that sort of got them to convince me to stay.
Mm.
Um, so, but when that happens and a coach hears that you wanted to go out the door, like, in retrospect, I should have just left right there,
Mm-hmm.
because he knows that, like, if things are not going well for you, like, he has an idea in his head that you're not the guy who's going to stick it out now.
Yeah.
So, I did end up staying and come back in the fall for preseason, but then it was like, I just felt like I couldn't win. Um, and that's when it reached a point where I felt like it didn't my performance really didn't matter, like, his mind was just made up.
Yep.
And I could be wrong, it could, obviously, there is a certain point where if you're scoring 10 goals every day in training, like, you can't possibly be kept on the bench.
Yeah.
But realistically, like, I just felt like I had no chance to play that season. So at that point, because it was in preseason, the only place I could work out a transfer that late on is with Northeastern, because my dad was there,
Mm-hmm.
just like logistically, to get me in for the fall. And so that's what I ended up doing for 2015.
Wow. Wow. So you left in 2015, like in the middle of preseason, then came and joined Northeastern's preseason.
Yeah,
Did the coast to coast.
yeah,
Huh. So what was that
yeah.
like to
Which, I
then go
mean,
and play
like,
for your dad at the college level then?
well, so that became its own disaster, to be honest. So essentially, what happened, I go there, probably beginning of September. I have to wait 4 weeks to get cleared by
Mm-hmm.
NCAA. From So I get cleared, probably play 2 or 3 games, and then he got fired as the
Oh
coach.
my gosh.
Um, and and yeah, and so, without um, going into that situation too much, because I don't know how much I really can go into that
Yeah.
situation. It was essentially something where I felt like I could not, like, I was not going to continue to play for that team
Yeah.
based on how he was treated. So I ended up quitting the team in middle to end of October, and so I'm still at the school at that point, and like, still had, like, options from teams that were looking at me in high school to go transfer again. But with NCA, if you transfer 3 times,
Mm-hmm.
so before the third time, I would have had to sit out a year.
Mm.
So I could have gone to another school, but I would have had to sit out an entire year before I could be eligible to play. And like for me, that was just not going to happen because I've already gone essentially 2 years without playing. So to go 3 years is like I might as well pack it
Yeah.
in as far as trying to play professional goes. So that was the point where I decided to leave school and try to go play in Europe.
So I think you've kind of referenced a little bit to maybe a college player who's listening out there and thinks they're in a tough situation. You've given a little bit of the blueprint of here are some of the things to look for if you think you need to transfer. And maybe you can expand on that a little bit because I do think there are certain players where it definitely is the right move for them to do. I know I speak to college coaches. I'm sure you speak to a lot of people in and around the game of all levels currently. And it seems like the transfer portal is bigger than it's ever been in the past in terms of
Yeah.
guys are like, I'm not happy, so I'm out. And obviously that was not the situation with you because it sounds like you wanted to put your best foot forward and it just didn't work out.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you would kind of say, if you have a friend or a teammate or something like that who's calling kind of in that situation and they're ready to leave, what would you kind of advise them? What are the things they need to make sure that they're looking for before they just ask for that release? Because it is a different ball game once you ask for that release.
It is. I think the number one thing that you can do that I wish I did is to be more proactive during the recruiting process
Mm,
in terms of figuring out which school is the best for you football wise. Um, and so there's a million things, right, when you're looking at schools to think about. School size, do they have your major? Socially, what's it like? How are the facilities? And all that's super important. But I think I certainly know I didn't do, and I bet a lot of kids don't do, is like watch the teams that you're getting recruited by
mm,
and see, you know, do you actually see yourself fitting in there? Because I think for what my profile as a player at that time um, really did not suit Stanford's style of play,
mm-hmm.
just straight up. And I felt like the whole time I was there, I was trying to, work on my weaknesses to fit that mold. Um, but at the end of the day, I had other options on the table that would have been a better fit for me, um, and really would have just made more sense for me to do that.
Mm,
Because I think what I've seen now is, yeah, you do get more exposure, you get looked at more by pro clubs at those schools, but like if you're playing well enough
yeah,
anywhere, like you'll push on.
100%.
It might not be, a top MLS pick, but like if you put enough good film on, you'll get picked up by someone, whether that's USL, whether that's overseas. Um, so yeah, definitely like try to find the right fit, prioritize the right fit for you football wise, before, and how the coach feels about you. Are you his top recruit, or are you one of, like I said, 10 guys that came
Yeah,
in and you're just, you're going to be in the mix, but like, um, you're not the guy. Um, Things like that, I think, is what you can do to put yourself in a position to not end up having to transfer
yeah,
in the first place.
yeah.
So I think if people did their homework more before, there would be less people in the portal.
Yeah, 100%. And because I think part of it is like players, I know certain players are maybe afraid to ask those tough questions, right? Because it's like a college coach and it's a big deal and they don't want to potentially mess up their recruitment. But it's a huge decision that you're making. You're essentially, if it all goes well, you're choosing the next 4 years to go and play for this program and this coach. So you'd rather ask the tough, uncomfortable questions now, like, do you actually see me as a fit here, or am I just a roster guy to fill things out? Like sometimes that's what the coaches they get paid to do, to answer those tough questions for you as a recruit. So you'd rather have an uncomfortable conversation before rather than a really uncomfortable conversation after where, hey coach, this isn't really working out and I want to transfer. Because as much as we say transferring is sometimes a good thing, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, definitely. But all this is easier said than done when we're in our 20s now
Yep.
compared to when you're 17, 18. Because I mean, when I'm sitting in these guys' offices at 17, like I don't feel like an adult. I
Nope.
feel like it's like whatever they tell me, it's like, yes, sir, 3 bags full.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? What do I have to do to play for you? Like, so you're kind of at their mercy. Like their presence is a little bit intimidating, to be honest.
Exactly.
Or like, you just want to like please them as much as possible, and then you know, make your decision based off all those other things. But yeah, if any kids out there can take that advice on board and maybe it'll help them out, then this will have been successful.
Yeah. Yeah. So then if you look at then your decision to go pro, obviously yours was influenced by the fact that it was going to be a year without the game, and that just didn't make sense in terms of your trajectory. What if, like, on the flip side, if you had played that season at Northeastern, do you think you still would have looked at that time, or would it have been maybe continuing on at Northeastern and then kind of going that route? Because I think I'm curious about that question too. Like, for guys who are looking at the pro game but are still in college, like, when's really the right time to make the jump?
I think the game kind of tells you when it's your time. Like, are you getting interest or are you not getting
Mm-hmm.
interest? Um, um, so there's that end, but also, like for me, as soon as there was a legitimate chance to go play pro, I was going to take
Yeah.
it. Um, Now this is a little bit different because this is where I had to, start reaching out to connections and see, where I could maybe get a chance to go trial. But if there had have been like anything, if I had have had a good season at Northeastern and there was teams interested, like I would have gone in a heartbeat. Same at Stanford, same as anywhere, same as like I said, if that had happened in high school,
Yeah.
like it's a no brainer for me. My mind's made up. Um, so I guess that's a little bit different circumstance because I was so dead set on
Mm-hmm.
doing it. Um, but yeah, I guess if you're a kid now, I think that's sort of the default is like the game is going to tell you if you're
Mm-hmm.
ready. Are you? Because if you're not, yeah, you could be in a circumstance where maybe you're not the right fit, and even though it's not to say that you need to perform in college to end up playing pro. Like I know guys who were not necessarily good in college that like I've played with and have pushed on to be good pros. But in general, I think you need to be performing at that level before you take your chances pushing on higher. Same goes for anyone. Like if I'm playing now in NISA, like I'm not gonna say after this season, no, I'm ready to go play in MLS if I haven't scored 30
Yeah.
goals. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%.
So I think it's just like being honest with yourself.
Yeah. So what was that first opportunity as you're reaching out to connections and your time in Northeastern is coming to a close? What where's the first stop on the European tour?
Yeah, so my U18 academy coach, who he's also the whole coach at Holy Cross. Um, I reached out to him, and he had a former player who was Icelandic, who was coaching for one of the bigger clubs in Iceland called KR Reykjavik. And Iceland, talk about soccer being a small world. Like Iceland is the smallest of the small, where um, you know he felt like he could send me to trial on any team just
Mm-hmm.
about with the amount of people he knew. So he was sort of my connection to get over to Iceland, and yeah, he sent me to two or three clubs, and ended up signing with a team called Lakener it's like the second tier. It was called like One Dealed,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like I think Pepsi Dealed, like Pepsi League was the top league, and then we were in the second level.
So how was that first experience going over and trialing with teams in Iceland? Like, I'm sure, kind of how you were mentioning before, and youth teams, you might be the best of the best, right? And then all these kind of guys meet when they come to the big time college programs, and then everybody becomes the best of the best, and now somebody's not the best of the best anymore, right? And I think that keeps happening, that keeps being recycled as you go higher and higher up the levels, and everybody who I'm sure was in and around that team has been the guy at some point in their career because now they're playing professionally. So what's that like when you're going into those pro trials, and then also on top of it, you're doing it in a place that's so completely foreign?
Yeah, so I was still like very like I before I ended up signing, I trialed with two teams in the top league in Pepsi,
Hmm.
and it was KR Reykjavik and Starjen, and like I performed, I felt like very well in those trials, and even um, in my retrospective, the way I remember those trials, like I do remember performing well, but now I have the understanding that like I wasn't good enough to get
Mm.
signed, if that makes sense. Like I think you can go to trials, especially when it's with a team in the middle of their preseason, and you can be at the level, but especially when you're a foreigner, you need to be better than what they already
Hmm.
have. And I realistically, at that time, no pro experience was not better than what they already have. Um, so at that time, I didn't understand that, and it was a little bit frustrating. But overall, like I kept handling it well. Like I felt every session I went into and every trial, like I was performing pretty well. And despite all the stuff that had happened to me in the past year or so, I had kept my head down, kept working, and I felt like I was sort of starting to get that like positive feedback loop back in. Um, to where I was getting good feedback from these coaches. It wasn't like, oh, he's not at it. It's just like, yeah, we want someone more experienced
Hmm.
to come in for this position, or we have three other center midfielders, so we're not going to take
Mm.
him. Um, so this was kind of stuff that um, kept me in a good mindset at that time.
So how did all the pieces of the puzzle come together to join the club that you winded up signing with in Iceland?
Yeah, that was so Lakener. That was crazy because I had done those two trials, where it was like a few sessions with
Yep.
both teams, didn't work out, and then it was getting towards the end of I had booked to stay there for 2 weeks, um, and it was getting towards the end of that, and then I got a call from my contact say this team is having a game, can you come play? They need an extra player. So I went, I played one game, and then I signed after that.
Wow.
So yeah, it was kind of crazy how that worked. But they had a game in Reykjavik, but they were located on the other side of the country. So yeah, I played that game, stayed one more night in my Airbnb, and then flew over across Iceland, which is only, I mean, Iceland's pretty small. It's only like an hour,
Yeah.
but then ended up going over there for the start of their season.
So what's that first contract like? Are you staying in a place by yourself, and is it training every day? Like maybe talk to a little bit of the people about kind of what Icelandic football is like and what your first professional season is like. Do you look back on it
Sure,
fondly or
that was a rude
oh,
awakening.
rude awakening? Is that what it was?
Yeah, that was another that's like an example of expectations versus
Mm.
reality. So the first two teams I was trialing for, like they're full-time, train during the day, um, really good professional environment, so on and so forth. Um, I wasn't sure what the players were making because I didn't ask them, but like, they're like I said, they were all full-time, so they must have been getting something like fairly
Hmm.
decent. This team, so obviously I only played the one game and like never trained with them, so I had no understanding of what I was really getting myself into. But for me, it was like, oh, it's a contract,
Yeah.
like sure, like let's do it. Um, so yeah, this was much different. This was so initially I was actually living the owner of the club, they were like hosting me until because they were waiting for like my apartment that I was going to share with another
Hmm.
player that was still I think getting renovated or something, so I stayed with the owner for I think the first month of the season. But so staying in his basement, um this town on the other side of Iceland is in the middle of nowhere, 700
Oh my
people.
gosh.
Yeah, so basically not even a town. This is a village we're talking
Yeah.
about. Um, training. So first I go over there training. They only had like maybe 14 players, all Icelandic,
Yep.
but we still had 3 weeks before the season to go, and the week before. So first I go over there, I'm thinking, oh, we have 14 guys. I'm going to play like a ton. Like, this is awesome. So I didn't really care that much about that. And the level was still, good enough to make me feel like, yeah, I'm happy to stay
Mm.
here. Um, and then the week before the season, we have, I think it was like 8 Spanish guys show up, um, all from the same agent. And these are guys that they're good,
Yeah.
man. Like, play, um, the Spanish pyramid has changed so much, but I think essentially what they had played like third or fourth tier Spain, which is like, I mean, a lot better than second
Yeah.
tier Iceland, I would imagine. But like, these guys came in, and it's all of a sudden like, wow, like, I'm not gonna play
Yep.
now. So that was kind of like, came out of nowhere, and but we were training only 3 times a week, which, to be honest, I never really understood, because everyone was essentially there for
Yeah.
football. Um, they're bringing all these international guys in, but I think it was because the coach and the Icelandic players were also working during the day, because we trained during the
Hmm.
evening. So that, again, so that's like expectations versus reality of like, I'm telling all my friends and family, yeah, I like signed my first pro contract, but now I can sit here and say like, yeah, I was getting paid, and housing, but that's not really like, it's not, I wasn't really
Mm.
pro, you know what I mean? And there were some teams, I think it's probably half and half at that level, where like half the teams were full time and half the teams weren't. Um, but I would consider us, semi pro.
I think I think that's such a funny conversation, and I guess you could call it an argument, like that people have all the time, where they'd be like, oh, well, the Regionalliga, like the fourth tier in Germany, is not technically pro, it's
Yeah.
amateur, but like you go and watch some
Yeah.
of those teams, it's like these guys are
The level is
these
so
guys are
good.
professionals, man. Like, okay, sure, they train 4 times instead of 5. Some of them also have it. Like, I don't, the whole that whole kind of argument. I think is fascinating to have, because it ends up depending on what you look at it for. Like, I would definitely, sure, we might say the level was lower for you there when you're in Iceland, but I would definitely still consider that pro, because that's what you're there to do, right? You're in that country to play football. You're getting paid to play
Right.
football. So, like, when you look at it from those strict definitions, I get completely what you're saying, that there's levels everywhere, where, I'm sure guys who have played at even higher levels where they're on super low contracts and they're like barely making enough to get
Mhm.
by. So it's like, well, then are they not pro? Like, I just, it's such a funny argument to have, like, with guys who are trying to do like what we're trying to do, especially when you're kind of in the lower leagues where there's a bit of that gray area, sort of.
Yeah, I think like basically, because what it can come down to for me is like, or now that I've seen all these different types of variations and levels, for me it's like, you can be a pro even if you're not at a pro
100%.
level, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Because at the end of the day, if I'm like, yeah, I'm there and we're only training 3 times a week, but the days we're not training, like, I'm training and I'm only there to play football. So like, for me, that's, you're a
Yeah.
pro. Um, but like, if you're like, I think of like England, National League, or National League North, National League South. Some of those guys, the players are full time, but the clubs only train twice a week because that's all they can afford for the
Mm.
facilities. So then I look at it as like, well, the club is if you ask the club, are you professional? The club would not say that they're a professional club,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So that's kind of where I draw but at the end of the day, it's all semantics. You know what I mean? I mean, I was there to play football at
Exactly.
the end of the day. So, but it definitely, like, at the time, I felt stupid saying I'm a pro, which in retrospect now we can sit here and say like, I shouldn't have felt stupid, but I definitely did at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, the same thing with the Stanford thing. It's the beauty of this podcast is we can look back and say, huh, maybe, when I was 19 or 20, I would have handled that situation slightly differently. Because as I've gone through this, as
Mhm.
I've told my stories, I would be like, yeah, you know what? I probably would have done this differently and that differently and and all the years of wisdom now teaches you kind of some things, and that experience for you when you're in Iceland, did it then lead to those Spanish guys just came in and kind of took those spots? And did you get any minutes?
I mean, I played I had
Oh
one
my
appearance
gosh.
in yeah. And like that, I mean, Jesus, that, but it was more, and again, in the situation, I don't see it happening, but it's so easy to see in retrospect that it's like the same exact cycle that led me to not getting to where I wanted to be in
Mm,
at Stanford, which is okay. Um, I'm not playing. Well, I'm going to
yeah.
work harder, and then I'm going to do this training program. I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to get faster. I'm going to, be a beast on the field. And then, you're not a beast on the field because you were a beast in the training session you had in
Mm,
the morning. So now when you go to training at night, you just don't have it. And yeah, man, that's like, I mean, I don't need to keep reciting that script, but that's kind of what the story was for that whole season. And there's also other elements to it, like a big one for me, and I don't know in your experience, playing overseas, I don't know if you had anything similar happen, but like my mentality going over there as a foreigner was very immature, from the standpoint that I didn't try to embrace their culture
mm,
at all, um, and I didn't see that there's things aside from how you're playing on the field that, like, dictate if you end up playing in the
mm,
games. Um, simply like, are you a good teammate? Are you a good guy? Do you go to team social events? Do you try to, learn the language? Things like that. That literally did not even dawn on me when I was that age. Like my whole thing was, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to be, Jamie Vardy and just like be a beast and move up the levels. And um, so I completely neglected that side of the game and was very, socially not involved with the team. Just felt like I was there to do my training, work hard, and go home. And I don't think that's the recipe for success, especially if you're going over to like those sort of lower levels in Europe.
yeah, because and maybe if we look at it more from kind of your perspective, and maybe it's a bit more of a cynical way to look at it, but in a way, you might need some of those people to kind of help you move up the ladder. Whether it be the coaches that you have, whether it be the players that you're playing with, if they know people that can maybe help you make that jump. It's a lot, and I'm sure you've done this for teammates that you've had or whoever. Like if they call you and say, "Hey, can you give me a recommendation or can you help me with something?" You're gonna
Yeah.
definitely want to do it for somebody who is a good guy, who's someone you want to hang out with, who somebody is a fun guy to have around the locker room versus somebody who maybe when you did play with them, you didn't get along with them. And not to say that you had bust ups with teammates or anything like that, but
No.
again, it's just like, well, I mean, yeah, he's a good player, but he's maybe a little bit quieter. Like, oh no, he's a great guy. He's a great guy to have around the locker room, and he's a good player as well. So you should really take a look at him. Like those little things, they sometimes are what makes the difference.
Yeah, and that, like I said, that didn't even dawn on me
Mm.
in the slightest when I in those earlier
So
years.
after that year in Iceland, is it so? Is there interest from them to bring you back, or is it kind of mutually like this is done?
Nah, mate. So I didn't even make it through. I made it to August, I think, August or July, and I'm like, I've had it. Like I can't keep staying in a village of 700 people to to not play a
Yeah.
single minute. And all those insecurities were really really coming out of me in that time, and my head was just like not in the place it
Yep.
should have been. It wasn't in the place to like keep fighting. Um, and when I say keep, like, yes, I was still going out, I was still working hard and training, but like mentally I was
Mm.
so over it. So
All right. I want to thank Alex once again. I know that was only the first part of our episode, so make sure if you are listening to this and the second one is already out, then you know right where to go for your next time that you're jumping into a podcast. If you are waiting patiently, the teaser that I'll give you is we talk a lot about his other pursuits in Europe. He's got time in Netherlands, Germany, Sweden, And trust me when I tell you that some of the stories that he has are incredible. So it's not one that you're going to want to miss. So thanks to Alex for coming on and sharing that story with us. Thanks to all of you out there who are listening. Quick reminder here, as I mentioned last episode, if you would like to support the podcast, it would be greatly appreciated if you could head over to the Patreon page that we have for In the 11. And it helps the show grow, helps support this content, helps support us keep continuing to do episodes like this one. And that's really all I'll ask from you at this time, besides heading over and checking out part 2 of the Alex Ainscough story.